February 1955. The frost so sharp it cracked windows, snow so deep it buried garden gates, and temperatures so low they rewrote the record books. One January afternoon, darkness fell over London, and thousands rang emergency services, convinced the world was ending. This wasn't just another cold snap. This was Britain gripped by two brutal spells of winter that turned every road into a potential death trap. From early January to mid-March, life on Britain's roads became a battle, not against an enemy you could see, but against ice, snow, and cold that turned familiar streets into killing grounds. The winter of 1955 wasn't the longest freeze Britain ever saw, but it was savage. And for those who lived through it, the memory of those frozen roads stayed with them forever. It started in the first week of January. A cold front swept down from the north, bringing snow that buried London under 15 centimeters. Roads vanished beneath thick snow overnight. Cars abandoned mid-street. Buses couldn't move. Within hours, Britain's transport network ground to a complete halt. But worse than the snow was what came after: black ice. February 23, 1955. History was made in Braemar. The temperature plummeted to -25 degrees, the coldest reading anywhere in Britain since 1895. That brutal cold turned melted snow into invisible sheets of ice. Black ice, the killer nobody could see coming. Drivers left their homes that morning thinking roads were clear. They weren't. Beneath thin layers of melted snow lay ice so transparent you couldn't spot it until your tires lost grip. Cars that had navigated snow drifts the week before now skidded helplessly on surfaces that looked perfectly safe. Up in Scotland, conditions became lethal. Snow lay 2 feet deep across the north, but it was the ice underneath that killed. Vehicles lost control on Highland roads. Some slid off cliffs. Others collided head-on with traffic coming the opposite direction. There were no barriers, no warning signs, nothing to stop a skidding car from its fate. Down south, even experienced London drivers found themselves helpless. A bus on Piccadilly hit a patch of ice and mounted the pavement. Pedestrians scattered. Some didn't make it. Emergency services couldn't respond quickly because their own vehicles kept sliding off roads trying to reach accident scenes. Life on Britain's roads became a daily gamble. Most cars in 1955 had no safety features, no seatbelts, no crumple zones, no airbags. When vehicles collided on icy roads, metal crumpled and bodies broke. Windscreens shattered into faces. Steering columns impaled chests. Every crash carried the potential for death, and there were no motorways yet. Britain's first wouldn't open until 1958. Everyone traveled on narrow country roads and city streets never designed for ice conditions. No gritting lorries prepared roads overnight. No salt reserves stockpiled for emergencies. Local authorities simply didn't have the resources or systems to make frozen roads safe. Drivers had no guidance either. No speed limits existed. No drink driving laws. No requirement to fit seatbelts or maintain tires. You could drive as fast as you wanted, in whatever condition your car happened to be, after drinking however much you fancied. On dry summer roads, this was already dangerous. On ice, it was suicidal. Cornwall saw 16 hours of continuous snowfall that February. A place that barely saw frost most years suddenly looked like the Scottish Highlands. Drivers who'd never encountered serious snow in their lives now navigated roads buried under feet of it, with ice forming underneath. They had no experience, no winter tires, no idea how to handle skidding vehicles. The elderly and vulnerable faced particular danger. Hypothermia was a real threat just trying to reach shops or doctors, but the roads themselves killed more. Pensioners slipped on icy pavements into paths of oncoming traffic. Mothers pushing prams couldn't stop on ice and rolled into busy streets. Children walking to school couldn't see black ice patches and fell under passing vehicles. Emergency services became overwhelmed. Ambulances trying to reach accident victims crashed themselves. Fire engines responding to calls slid off roads. Police couldn't investigate collisions fast enough because new ones kept happening. The system wasn't built to handle ice-related carnage on this scale. Doctors made house calls through snow that came up to their waists. But getting there meant driving on deadly roads. Some doctors crashed trying to reach patients. Others arrived hours late because they'd witnessed accidents and stopped to help, only to see more crashes happen right in front of them. Hospitals filled with trauma cases, broken bones from slips, head injuries from falls. but mostly victims of vehicle collisions. Wards designed for peacetime capacity suddenly resembled wartime casualty clearing stations. Nurses worked double shifts, treating an endless stream of road accident victims. But on January 16th, something extraordinary happened in London. At 1:15 in the afternoon, daylight vanished. Pollution from coal fires mixed with a cold front, creating smog 4,000 feet thick. Light levels dropped to 1,000th of normal. Drivers couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. They kept driving anyway. Cars crashed into each other in the darkness. Some hit pedestrians they never saw. Others drove off roads into ditches or buildings. The smog turned every street into a blind maze where death waited around corners nobody could see. People phoned emergency services, genuinely believing the world was ending. In a way, for some, it was. Roads became impossible. Cars disappeared under snow. Buses gave up completely. And if you needed to go somewhere, you either walked through deadly conditions or drove through them. Neither option was safe. Pedestrians froze to death trying to walk long distances. Drivers died in crashes trying to navigate invisible ice. Postmen still made their rounds, trudging through knee-deep snow. Some never made it home, found frozen by the roadside where they'd slipped on ice and couldn't get back up. The mail had to get through. Tradition, stubbornness, and pride. But ice doesn't care about tradition. The winter wasn't just cold, it was relentless. January's freeze gave way to warmer days. Roads cleared, people relaxed. Then February arrived and brought it all back worse. That's when the real killing started. Because roads that had been icy became wet. Then they froze again into black ice, even more dangerous than before. Farmers couldn't transport livestock or crops. When they tried, lorries skidded off rural roads and overturned. Drivers trapped in cabs for hours in -20 temperatures. Some rescued. Some found frozen solid behind steering wheels when help finally arrived days later. For the elderly living alone, winter became a death sentence. Not from hypothermia in their homes, but from trying to navigate icy streets to reach shops or doctors. Falls on ice led to broken hips, lying on frozen pavements waiting for help that couldn't arrive, because ambulances were stuck in snow or crashed on ice themselves. But here's what nobody tells you about the winter of 1955. It changed British road safety forever. The death toll from ice-related accidents shocked the government into action. Within years, new policies emerged. Speed limits introduced in 1967, seatbelt requirements, drink driving laws, winter road gridding programs. The winter also exposed how unprepared Britain's infrastructure was. No salt reserves, no gridding equipment, no emergency response protocols for mass winter casualties. The government realized you couldn't just hope winter would be mild. You had to prepare for the worst. Children, of course, thought the snow was wonderful. They built snowmen and had snowball fights, but their parents knew better. Every time a child left the house, there was genuine fear they might not come back. Slipping into traffic, falling through ice on frozen ponds, getting lost in snowdrifts. Winter had turned childhood into a minefield. The cold finally began to ease in mid-March. Roads reappeared. Ice melted. The first delivery trucks rolled through without crashing, and Britain, tired, traumatized, and grieving, began counting its dead. Exact numbers were never fully recorded. Deaths from road accidents weren't tracked as carefully in 1955 as they are now. But survivors remembered. They remembered the funerals, the families destroyed, the children orphaned when parents crashed on ice, the elderly who never made it home from shops, the drivers who left for work one morning and never returned. Winter 1955 didn't just kill. It traumatized an entire generation. The scars remained. Farms had lost workers in road accidents. Businesses lost employees. Communities lost neighbors. And every surviving driver gained a permanent fear of ice. Even decades later, they'd slow to a crawl at the first sign of frost. They'd check weather forecasts obsessively. They'd remember friends who didn't survive. The winter of 1955 taught Britain a brutal lesson. Roads that seemed safe could become death traps in minutes. Ice you couldn't see could kill you just as dead as ice you could. And no amount of careful driving guaranteed survival when conditions turned lethal. There were no smartphones to check road conditions, no traffic apps warning of ice, no weather alerts telling you to stay home. Just neighbors, community, and the grim determination to survive. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't safe, but somehow most people made it through. The frost of 1955 is still talked about today, not just because of record temperatures or massive snowfalls, but because of how many lives it took on Britain's roads. Black ice that nobody saw coming, crashes that nobody could prevent, deaths that nobody could have predicted that morning when they kissed their families goodbye. Britain had survived the war, survived bombing raids and rationing and years of hardship. But that winter showed that nature could be just as deadly as any enemy. The ice that formed on roads killed without warning, without mercy, without giving anyone a chance to fight back. When Britain's roads became death traps in 1955, it revealed something important: that infrastructure matters, that preparation saves lives, that you can't just hope for the best when winter arrives. You have to be ready. And if you're not, people die. Simple as that. The snow eventually melted. The ice retreated. Roads became safe again. But families never forgot empty chairs at dinner tables. Children never forgot parents who never came home. Survivors never forgot the sound of metal crashing on ice, or the sight of vehicles abandoned where they'd skidded off roads. Trust the warnings. Prepare your vehicle. Check the forecast. Because winter doesn't care about your plans.